Hey guys, so if you're wondering why I keep getting these packages from Avalon Bay, it's because they specialize in apartment, tiny living tools. And because we are in a lot of tiny houses, everything that they send us seems to be pertinent. So this is the space heater that they sent us. The one that we'd had for a year and put some pretty hard use on it is in the trash. Every time you even bumped it, this one, you can tip it a little bit and it won't turn off. If you tip it all the way down, it will turn off. But the other one that we used, you would bump it and it would turn off, and it was very loud. This one, it was pretty quiet. It doesn't make a huge amount of noise. It has a really nice fan that blows a lot of air out into the room, but it doesn't scald you. I don't know if it has, it must have some kind of, does it have a sensor on it so that it's not?
It's a ceramic unit, so it dissipates the heat beautifully. It makes big, warm air rather than a small hot air.
Yeah, it feels like a warm air bubble around it rather than like this projected heat that scalds your feet. So I would have to say, once again, I really like the stuff that Avalon Bay makes. And the thing about tiny house living, and what we found in our tiny house back home, was that even in a tiny house, the way that you section it off and whether or not everything is open makes a huge difference in how the heat travels. And John told me that before we got into it, and I totally didn't believe him. I'm like, this is a tiny house. How big was ours? 320 square feet, something like that? If you include the lofts?
Something like that, yeah.
It's like 320 square feet if you include the lofts. What were we, 12 by 30? Yeah, so 500 square feet. If you count having to crouch down on one, in everything that was above ground level. So what ended up happening is that we used wood heat back in our tiny house, and it was intense, I think would be the best word to use for it. Well, we used the little teeny tiny army stove at first, and you would be nice and comfortable downstairs, but then you would go upstairs and you would feel like you were going to die, and we would have to sleep with the windows open even in fall. And then we got the rocket mass heater, which was even more efficient, and it became really miserable. Downstairs it would be really warm, upstairs it would be like the surface of the sun. Even though it was small and even though it was absorbing heat and letting it out slow because it had the mass around it, it was just so hot. So what I would say is, in a tiny house, a lot of times you're not going to have like a forced air system because the house is too small and you don't want to waste that space on heating ducts, especially if it's a moving tiny house. You really don't want to have space. You just don't want to mess with that. And you don't want to have to mess with the, what is it called? The big propane or electric heater? What would you call it? What's the thing that is the hot air, forced hot air? Because we haven't, have we ever had forced air?
No, we've never had forced air.
Yeah, we did. We did. In the Nixon house, we did.
Oh, yeah, we had forced air furnace.
What's that called? A furnace. Okay, so a furnace takes up a whole, well, I'm sorry, we haven't had one in how many years?
Right.
So the furnace is what forces the air through those heating ducts, and it also takes up a ton of space. So just like you have like the on-demand water heaters in tiny houses so that you don't have this huge heavy water heater in your tiny house, also you want your heating source to be small, and in my opinion you want it to be movable. Because once you get into your house, you're going to find those pockets where it's really cold in some places and it's really hot in some places. And if you can't move your heater, then you're kind of stuck unless you kind of want to remodel your house. They do have the duo heater, the one that does the heating and the cooling, and we found a lot of those in the tiny houses that we stayed in. But in every single one of those tiny houses, we also found space heaters in all sorts of funny places. Because again, the longer you live in it, the more you find that even though it's a tiny space, you do have cold pockets, you do have really hot pockets, kind of depending on your climate. For us in the summer in the cabin, it actually didn't get real hot as long as we opened and closed doors at strategic times. It was really pleasant. We didn't need an air conditioner in the tiny house, but we really needed to have once it started to get cold, I tried to use the little propane buddy, which is a nice little portable propane thing, and it is meant for use indoors. It's meant for like use in a tent and that kind of thing. But we got a lot of moisture inside the house, and it just couldn't keep up. Even though it was a tiny house, it could not keep up with keeping us warm. And we had to get the propane tank. So I do think that the propane is good for an emergency. But if you do have what's it called when you plug an RV in? What's that called? Into like at an RV park?
Shore power.
Shore power. If you do have shore power and you have a tiny house with shore power or an RV with shore power, I believe that it's really nice to have something like this. And we did use our other tiny little space heater a ton while we were in the RV because of the pain in the butt it was to get the furnace in the RV started up and have it force the air out. And it ate a lot of propane to do that. So whenever we had shore power, we used it. This one is more expensive than what we purchased. What was ours, like $30? $35. It lasted a year. We used it somewhat heavily. It wasn't very pretty, and it was really loud.
It was an electrical coil heater, which meant it was dangerous.
Which is why probably if you bumped it, it would turn off.
Yes, it turned off at any excuse that it could find because of that. It was the only safety it had was, okay, shut it down because those coils were red hot. Yeah, they would. They were actually red hot. So it was nice that it had that safety, but it would get really aggravating just as things would start to get cold when you needed to. Here in this tiny house, we're at about 500 square feet, right? Yep. And what it is that it's shaped a little interestingly because we don't have forced air. The heat is not even in the house. So we have the propane heater that's in the living room, and then we have this in here in the bedroom, and if you're going to use the bathroom, you take the heater in with you. Because again, you wouldn't think that in a tiny house it would matter that you don't have forced air, but it does matter. So again, I haven't found a product that wasn't as advertised from the Avalon Bay. I will say that the spin dryer, I did not like it as a washer, except for very delicate things, which would be the wool that I use for spinning. So I really liked it as a wool washer, but I would not recommend it as a laundry washer. But it worked really well as like a spin dryer that you would then like take your clothes out of and put on the drying rack. I liked their Eco Wash a lot for my off-grid laundry, but the thing I didn't like about it was that I was having to reach my hands into really hot water in order to get the clothes out, and then they would be sopping wet. And so the Eco Spin kind of solved that problem for me, as long as I didn't mind that I could only get one wash out of each batch of water that we brought in, which was kind of a problem since we were off-grid. But we were wasting a lot of water and burning our hands trying to get our laundry done without the Eco Spin. So I am excited to try that once we get home to Idaho. Let's see, what else have we tried from the Avalon Bay? Have I tried anything else? I think this is the other one. This is the only other one I can think of. But I think this is the only other. Oh, no. So out in the shed, I still have. Do I have one box or two boxes? Do you remember? I have the food sealing system with the Mylar type bags. Vacuum sealing? I think it's a vacuum sealer. I haven't tried it yet. I wanted to try it with some of my herbs, but I haven't tried it yet. But I have pretty good confidence in their products at this point. We haven't had anything fall apart. We haven't had anything show up with missing parts. And even everything's just really high quality and as described.
Yeah, it's. I wouldn't say that it's essential, that everything that they sell is essential. I think a lot of it would be for like a prepper type situation, because a lot of it isn't something that you would be using unless you were in an apartment and you didn't want to have to go to the laundromat, or if you were off grid and you had the ability to haul water in, and that was the situation we used it for. So for apartment living and for tiny house living and for off-grid living, I think that their products are really fantastic. That doesn't mean I'm telling you to run out and buy them. I'm just saying that I generally don't keep stuff in the house that I don't use, and I have yet to get rid of anything that they've sent me. I find myself using it in my daily life, and I'm actually really,
the most impressed with the heater. This is more expensive than anything else they sent me. I think it was $150 if I remember correct. I'd have to go look. I think it was $150. It's super, super quiet. It keeps you super warm. I'm right next to it. I couldn't have been this close to the other space heater because it would have burnt me really bad. But I can have my hand here right in front of the heater and I'm not having pain. I'm just, you know, the air's just kind of moving around me and warming me. So, yeah. That being, and it's called the New Air by Avalon Bay. So again, I'm not sponsored by them. It's just that they send me boxes of goodies, and because I am a prepper at heart, I have so much fun trying new tools and seeing if they're as good as anything that I've tried before. And I'm a sucker for off-grid tools and for tiny, pretty tools, because this is I think it's pretty attractive, and it does come with a little remote, but we haven't used it. We live in a tiny house. Where would we, you know, click it from? So, any other thoughts on it?
Oh, I'm just listening to the dead silence right now.
I know, it's so quiet. Would we buy it again ourselves? Yes, we would buy it again. I think that now we've only had it out of the box for what, 2 weeks? About 2 weeks. So the other one that we had lasted for a year, and then it just got to the point where it was just crap. It was not always working, and it looked awful, and it was loud. And so if this one lasted longer than a year, do I think that the money's worth it? Yes, I think the money's worth it if it has some longevity to it. However, I will say that we have only used it for 2 weeks, so I don't know. And I do believe I probably have a coupon code below, and I will put that in, and a link to this. We have been in houses that had the dual thing, that it's like a long strip that sits on the wall, and we did find that it always seems to be like in the wrong place, and because usually they're put up high in the wall, your feet are going to be cold, because instead of having heater on the ground where you know the heat then can rise, instead you've got all this heat up at the top, and how are you gonna, so you got to have a lot of fans and stuff to force the air down. And I have no idea how much they cost. I don't know how much the dual heating cooling system that's for tiny houses, I don't know how much they cost, but I think this was $150. So
great product.
it's a great product, and again, not sponsored, but I have to do the vacuum sealing system soon too, but I needed to get this done before we lost all of our cold weather and nobody cared anymore.
Well,
there we go. Do you think I'm pretty dynamic in my approach to talking about tiny space heaters? Could I be more sultry as I talk about my tiny space heaters?
we're talking about 60 hertz.
60 hertz.
115 volts.
Right. Okay, go check them out. And again, I'm not pushing you to buy these products. I'm just giving you the experience that we've had with them. So, and I am wearing one of my shirts, but I don't want to show you because I just ate lunch. So it'll make my belly look fat. So if you want one of my shirts, they're in the link in the description below. I don't know if I can get any closer to it. Should I get closer to it and see if I can? There's no way to look sexy next to a heater.